Welcome to Falcons Drip, your go-to source for Falcons news and draft coverage. I'm Thon, founder and voice of Falcons Drip. As usual, I'm joined by my co-hosts, Jeff and Ferg. Today we're discussing the offensive line, going to break down who we think is going to be starting, where the position battles are, and before we get into that, Ferg's got some knowledge he's going to drop on us.
Sure, fun fact of the day. Ostriches can run faster than horses, and male ostriches can roar like lions.
So 2 facts.
Well, it's a bundled deal because we're talking about ostriches, and I'm sure there's more fun facts about ostriches. I know they're flightless birds as well.
Is it true they stick their heads in the ground?
I don't believe
Jeff.
that that's true. I do know that they have massive talons, too. They can slice you right open if they kick you right.
You guys know if slugs have 4 noses?
Okay, so now we've got 3. 4 with Jeff's
3.
talons.
We have 4 facts, yeah.
So do you think with the talons, Jeff, that you would create a team, the ostriches, maybe the Orlando Ostriches?
There's some alliteration there. That's good potential on an actual team name.
Well,
I've created a lot of teams on Madden.
Oh, do you guys remember we created it was a team entirely made up of offensive linemen? Max Unger was the quarterback. I'll never forget that.
I remember that.
And Jeff Saturday still played center.
And that's a perfect transition for us because today we are talking about offensive line, specifically in Atlanta, obviously. So let's just take a look at the guys who we know are going to be for sure starters, right? And you can't talk about anyone in that light without talking about Jake Matthews. Jake's been a solid at least left tackle for us since he was drafted. He gets kind of a bad rap, and I think part of that is because of how great his dad was. His dad's a Hall of Fame tackle, and Jake really hasn't lived up to that. But he's been very solid for us for a long time.
He's been solid in a league, too, where it's very hard to find even solid, decent tackles. So you're looking at actually a great acquisition because you don't have to go out every year and try and find one. There are teams every year, like look at the Seahawks and stuff. They're trying every year to find some tackles just to keep Russell Wilson upright.
And I think too, like he gets a bad rap because he does miss some plays. But one thing that fans don't understand, and I take advantage of, I take for granted is like every single week he's left on an island one-on-one with the defensive end. So if it's your Khalil Mack, if it's your, they bump Aaron Donald out there, TJ Watt, like they're saying, okay, Jake Matthews has this guy one-on-one, and for most of the game, he does a pretty good job.
Yeah, and they're in passing downs a lot over the past few years. Like you're going to have more opportunity for mistakes when you're passing the ball all the time, when you're down and you're trying to catch up. Because the pass rushers know they just get to run free. It's a whole different experience than if you're winning most of your games.
So I think just with our tackle position too, we don't have a lot of depth there with, in which we can get into a little bit. Matt Gono potentially being injured. Jake Matthews is a for sure lock at left tackle. Nothing else really to say about him. So following Jake as being a starter, we know Chris Lindstrom.
I was going to say, Chris is probably a lock too.
For sure a lock. And I know Ferg, he's one of the guys who you've talked about as being like a breakout player.
Yeah. I think he will be. I think, he's he's new to the league, so I think he'll do well. And just starting when you're new to the league that's a breakout. If you start when you're new to the league and you do okay, like you know what, like let's backpedal. Just talking about AJ Terrell, same thing. I think that Chris Lindstrom will have a comparable season at the offensive line position.
So and they say, because this is Lindstrom's going to be his 3rd year, and they say for offensive linemen they really start to kind of come into their own after 3 to 4 years. It takes a little while to adjust to the speed and the strength, and especially interior. You're dealing with a lot of big, strong men that come off the line explosively.
Right. He's, like you said, he's still new to the league, so it's just it's going to take him time to find his stride. And this season, I think this season's the season for him. But that's really all I have to say about Chris Lindstrom. Yeah. I want to see him in action.
And he's already talked about as being like one of the better guards in the league, but we could really see him take over. Like when you talk about defensive tackles, you say, okay, like Aaron Donald's the best, but who's after that? And Grady Jarrett is always one of those guys, top 5 for sure. And I think we could kind of see Chris Lindstrom in that position with the offensive guard position.
Oh, that'd be really nice. That'd be really nice, especially coupled with Jag Matthews. I mean, that would make for a really strong offensive line.
2 strong linemen for sure. Like Quentin Nelson. So it would be like sort of the Aaron Donald.
It's tough, though. Like we talked about, I just want to point this out. Defensive line is different from offensive line in that you can have one guy that disrupts plays on the defensive line, and the defensive line can be good because of that, right? It'll make the other defensive lineman good. Whereas the offensive line, it's it's the opposite. If you have one weak point, it can make the more useful or the better offensive lineman around that weak point not look as great because you just got water coming through the hole all day.
And not to kind of go back, but I think that's also been part of the problem. Like Jake Matthews, is we've really had struggle at finding solidifying our left guard for a little while.
Yeah.
So like it makes it harder for Jake to kind of do the things that he needs to do when you're always worried about the guy next to you. But just with Chris Lindstrom, that makes it that much more important to have one guy in there who can kind of like, he's going to do his role. He's going to do what he needs to do.
Sure.
And especially because we're not 100% sure on the rest of the line, it seems. Jeff, any input on Chris Lindstrom?
No, nothing that you guys haven't really already touched on. Just it'll be interesting to see with a more power rushing attack how that changes, how some of these guys play. Does it make the game better for them? Do they become better or more confident, or is it actually harder for them? And because they're playing in a different system too, and so it's an interesting.
Definitely, and Lindstrom's now he's a war pig now. He's not a war daddy like Khalil Mack was, or not Khalil Mack, Alex Mack was, but he's a war pig. He likes to get after it and get down and nasty. So the next guy we have to talk about, and probably I wouldn't say as sure of a thing as Chris Lindstrom, but we got to talk about Caleb McGarry, Lindstrom's draft mate. McGarry has improved steadily over the last 2 years, and I expect him to kind of continue to improve and be a solid right tackle for us this upcoming season.
And I would think when we're just talking about more of that power rushing game, him and Lindstrom should benefit from that. I think it'll help with McGarry's confidence too, just being able to know that on some plays he's going to get to go really push and try and lay some guys out.
So is that something that Caleb struggles with? It sounds like what you guys are saying is he's pretty strong in the run game, but pass blocking he has trouble.
Definitely more trouble. So like for some of the reasons why we talk.
I mean, he's a massive individual, so it makes sense why he's better suited for the run game. 6'7", 317, like that's
and
massive.
His attitude. I mean, he came into the league, said, "I want to be the boogeyman. I want defensive linemen to fear me," like something along those lines. I can't think if that was the exact quote, but he just he likes getting down and dirty and running the ball, and he likes to move people. For similar reasons, and we'll jump into Jalen Mayfield later, but McGarry struggles for kind of some of those reasons. Mayfield struggles, and that's like the shorter arms. Less. Mayfield looks like a better athlete, but testing wise, he didn't test great. But he's taken like significant improvement year to year, and even at like the beginning of the year to the end of the year, McGarry's gotten better the last 2 years. So we're coming into year 3. We got Lindstrom and McGarry hopefully taking big steps.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see McGarry prove his pass blocking a little bit, especially on a team that's so pass heavy. I know we've talked about this 100 times before. The recent acquisition, or I guess I should say, departure of Julio Jones. It doesn't really affect their scheme, right? Although, and there's new coaching staff, it doesn't really affect the scheme in that. Really, the scheme is around. When I say it doesn't affect the scheme, I mean it doesn't affect the fact that they're going to continue to throw the ball a ton, but the scheme may change, right? How they dish the ball, where they go with the ball, but they're going to pass the ball a ton. And for that matter, in order, if McGarry wants to, if he wants a more solid position, I think on the offensive line or a guaranteed spot, he definitely needs to improve his pass.
Yeah.
Pass
and
blocking.
I think like just talking about the scheme, you're definitely going to pass the ball a lot. Just look at the team that you have: Matt Ryan, Kyle Pitts, Calvin Ridley. But at the same time, we're going to run it way more than we have in years past with Dirk Cutter calling the plays.
Why do you think that is? I mean,
so if you just look at Arthur Smith and what he did in Tennessee, obviously they had Derrick Henry, so their whole team was centered around the run, and I don't think that'll be the case because we don't have Derrick Henry, right? I mean, there's only Arthur Smith came out and said, there's only one Derrick Henry.
Yeah.
But Arthur Smith, he has learned from a lot of run-oriented head coaches, or not head coaches, just coaches in general. So Mike Mularkey was the head coach over there, and he was a very run-heavy guy. He was in Atlanta, I believe, when they had Michael Turner. He was the offensive coordinator, and they would just pound the ball. And then also, I can't remember who's the Green Bay coach again right now.
LaFleur.
LaFleur came from the Kyle Shanahan system, and he was the offensive coordinator there before Arthur Smith took over. So Arthur Smith has just been around a lot of guys who really make running the ball not a focus, but a strong point of the team. And they really want to make sure that they establish the run game.
They want to use the run game to help set up the pass, make it easier, establish a healthy balance.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think it'll probably be so. I think in Tennessee it was let's use the run game to open the pass game. I think it'll be a little bit of the opposite here. Like, let's have the pass game to open up the run game. Really, passing the ball is where our strengths are as far as players, but we're going to run the ball too. So before we go down that rabbit hole too far, so our three starters we're talking about are Jake Matthews at left tackle, Chris Lindstrom at guard, and then Caleb McGarry at right tackle. And I want to talk about the center position right now. Like, who do you guys kind of see as the favorite coming out? Obviously, we drafted Matt Hennessy last year, who was at the time was pretty tiny. I think he came out at like 290 pounds. And then we got Drew Dahlman, who's also on the smaller side. We drafted this year at 300 pounds. But Hennessy has put on some weight. I think they're saying he's walking around like closer to 305, 315.
Well, he'll probably at least start the season. And if they have problems, everyone's going to have problems. But if they begin to have a lot of problems at that position, maybe we'll see Dahlman get some more play time. I don't see any reason why we wouldn't see Hennessy at least get the start.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Dahlman would have to, he'd really have to show out. I think, in order to remove Hennessy from that starting position.
I think it gets like it's difficult for rookies to come in and
exactly.
especially on the offensive line to come in and immediately take over a veteran.
It's definitely the I totally agree. At those positions, like the line positions or the positions really that aren't skill positions, I think there's a bigger transition than that is at the skill position. Skill position, you're more reliant on your awareness, your speed, your agility, whereas offensive defensive line, it's just a big change. You got to put on weight, you got to put on muscle. Yeah, it's not as easy. Not that the skill position transition is easy, but I don't think it's as easy for most of the guys.
Just think about like developmentally where you're at when you're 21 versus 28 or
Absolutely.
25 even.
Yeah, I mean, look at Gordon Hayward. I know we're talking about football, but he graduated high school at 6'2", and he graduated college at like 6'9".
Mm-hmm.
It's point being is exactly to your point. It's just you're still developing. There's still a lot of physical development going on, and at the offensive line position, you just see how much of an impact that makes for these guys. Physically, you got to be geared up.
That being said, though, Hennessy's only had 1 year, but that 1 year can make a huge difference.
Right.
In a pro workout program, you're focusing solely on just getting stronger. You're focusing on football. But let's just see,
Yeah.
because if Matt Hennessy has been slacking this offseason, I expect Dahlman to really push him for
Exactly.
that
Well, and that's why I say I think he gets a start. I think he gets the start. I don't necessarily think he retains the position. For instance, it's not exactly the same, but it definitely is to a degree. It's similar. Like when you're in high school, you get some of those your buddies that go off to, they go off to play college ball, whatever. They come back and their bodies have changed after that first year. It's the same thing in the NFL. These programs are different. These guys now have personal trainers as opposed to like you got one or two trainers for the whole program, or maybe for different groups, different positions, different sides of the ball. You now have the ability to pay for personal trainers. You're probably encouraged to pay for personal trainers.
And probably
your diet
like chefs,
gets in check.
chefs and nutritionists.
It's just a different. You're talking about a different. It's now a job, and one could say or argue it's a job in college too, especially when you get into the, the bigger conferences.
You just have so much more you're focused on.
It just It just depends because if you're talking about like Mississippi State or something like that, I don't know. Maybe an eighth of the team goes on to play in the NFL. An eighth of the starting lineup is what I mean to say.
Yeah, a lot. Chances are you're more like
what I'm saying. So they're gearing everyone up to really go out into the world and be part of your 9-to-5 society, as opposed to. If you're talking about Alabama, you got guys that never touched the field. They're making NFL rosters. You know what I mean? It's a different.
I remember there was an Alabama linebacker a couple of years ago that was a backup and got drafted in the 5th round.
Exactly.
I don't remember who it was, but
it's just different. It's just different, right? You're talking about different programs. You're talking about different, and Alabama's the perfect program to use here to bridge the gap because of what you just said. You have it. It shows the difference in business versus, lifestyle business versus this is for fun. This is for, enjoyment.
It's a sport versus a job.
There you go. Sport versus a job or a career. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And one thing you guys didn't talk about either when you're talking about coming in and becoming the center has to make the line checks.
That's a good point.
And so he has to learn, Dahlman has to learn all that as well. Hennessy's, going to be a slightly different system, so it's going to be a little bit of learning for him.
Yeah.
But he's played with all these guys for a year. He knows the strengths, the weaknesses of the guys around him and what they are expecting. So Dahlman's going to have to learn all that as
Jeff,
well.
To your point, I want to ask, did Hennessy touch the field last season? I truly don't know.
So he did, and he played a little bit, and he was pretty bad.
All right, so he's pretty bad. Well, it's just to Jeff's point. Jeff was just saying that, right, the center needs to make the line checks, et cetera. And Jeff, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just want to I want to further your point here. Dahlman would really have to outperform Hennessy, and Hennessy would have to drop the ball. It couldn't just be he outperforms him, because there's all this other criteria that are, there's all these other variables that have to be understood. Like line checks or just understanding the offense. And it's something that Hennessy surely has a grip on at this point. Dahlman, I doubt Dahlman has a grip on it. But anyway, Jeff, I just wanted to further your point. I really agree with what you were saying there.
So Dahlman is a high IQ player, so he might be able to learn it quick.
Well, and if Hennessy didn't perform, that's the thing. I didn't know how often Hennessy touched the field or last year or whatever, what we saw in him. And if he really didn't perform, as Thon was saying, I hope that he's able to adjust fairly quickly.
When you look at it, though, like if you look at Hennessy's situation, Alex Mack goes down, he goes in at center, and now you've got second-year Chris Lindstrom to your right, who's a pretty good player, but still a second-year lineman.
Sure.
So you're sitting there, you've got Chris Lindstrom to your right. You've got James Carpenter to your left, who was atrocious last year, and you're a rookie, 290-pound. You're known for your speed. You're known for your athleticism. He's in a bad spot as a center in that situation.
Yeah,
like he was set up for failure as a rookie.
You're saying because he didn't have a supporting cast.
Yeah, and I think I was really hard on Matt Hennessy last year and even this offseason. At one point, even said like Dahlman's coming in to start. Like that guy's like, that's it, Dahlman's starting. And when you think about it, though, I think I was wrong because Hennessy, again, for the reasons we talked about, he has these experiences, and he was really set up to fail.
And it sounds like he probably wasn't taking snaps. So it was an injury that got him in the game. He wasn't taking snaps with the starting lineup, so he's no chemistry with these guys, right? You're taking into account chemistry. It's his first year. He's playing with supporting cast that's inexperienced as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's weird because like I think we were kind of touching on this earlier. Jake Matthews being out there at left tackle, that's really he's on an island, man.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing your own thing out there. You really are. You're part of the offensive line. You're part of that unit, but your job. You basically have one job. You know what I mean? Out there in that left tackle position, you got one job.
They were
really
counting. They were really counting on him. They were really counting on him to say, all right, like
lock
that's
it
the
down.
best pass rush. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're going to adjust everybody else to how we have to.
Yeah. That inner, center guard, that
they got to know a lot
interior
more what's going
piece.
on.
Exactly. That's like
who's pulling, who's creeping to the second level, who's double
100%.
teaming. And the tackles do have to do that too.
Especially left tackle, though, not to the same degree.
Yeah.
Your job is to make sure no one tees off on the QB coming around the edge.
It's definitely the most important thing. But we all agree Dahlman is very similar to Hennessy, and he's going to make the roster this year. He'll be the backup center, if not starter by the end of the year.
Yeah, Dahlman and Hennessy are very similar somewhat in college. They're both very accomplished, undersized centers. Good IQ, good
athleticism.
Yeah, and they get to the right plays, but they're smaller and not as strong as some of the other guys. So that's where you need to see the big improvements.
Mm-hmm.
Really,
and they're going to push. They're going to push each other. Like I expect it to be a real competition. I think Hennessy's going to start with the job, and I do expect him to kind of retain the job for a while, and then Dahlman possibly surpass him later in the year and take over. Any disagreements with what we talked about at center? And I think those are going to be probably the only two true centers we keep on the roster.
I would think so because they're far and away better than anybody else on the roster.
So now we're going to talk about the Atlanta Falcons' revolving door at offensive line as the left guard. And there are so many different things that could happen here. Obviously, we talk about Jalen Mayfield, and we talk about Jalen Mayfield kind of being the guy that takes over the left guard spot, and the guy who I think everyone's rooting for to take over. I want to talk about a couple of things why Jalen Mayfield may not be taking that over as fast as we would like. So, Jalen Mayfield played tackle in Michigan. He played right tackle. And I've used this, I haven't used this phrase before, but if you were to play right tackle and then switch to the left side, everything's reversed. And I had an offensive lineman tell me, like, imagine if you wipe your butt with your right hand, imagine now trying to wipe with the left. Like, it's difficult. It's not the same. It's not as easy transition as just going over to, you need practice. You need repetition. You need to be kind of learning it and doing it. That being said,
have you tried?
I have not tried. No.
You've never just wiped your butt with your left hand just to try it?
No, but maybe I will. So, So, Mayfield, through this it's like, okay, he needs reps. He needs time to learn this left guard spot through OTAs and all the practices. Matt Gano has been hurt, which we haven't talked about much, but we should probably get into it a little bit. And Caleb McGarry has not been playing. So, Jalen Mayfield's been running with the first offensive line as the right tackle.
What about, I'm just looking at the depth chart here. What about Wilson Wright? It's Willie Wright. I want to call him Wilson.
So that the left guard, like Willie Wright is like, we've got so many offensive linemen like kind of on Willie Wright's level, and there's going to be so many guys competing for those backup positions. For the starting spot, I think you got to talk about Jalen Mayfield, the loser of the center position, right? So either
it'll probably be Drew Dahlman and Jalen Mayfield is what you're saying, battling.
Are probably going to compete
in all likelihood.
If the loser of the center position takes over, I am terrified for some of the bull rushes that they're going to try and send at those two.
Oh, that's a good. Yeah.
I agree, but I think just as far as competition goes,
Yeah,
like,
Jalen Mayfield's absolutely huge. He's 6'6". Now, I think Jalen Mayfield's going to take that position. I know he's a young
right
guy.
now,
but
the guy who's the starter there and the guy who's been practicing with the ones at left tackle or left guard is Josh Andrews, and that's
why wouldn't you give it to Jalen Mayfield? Riddle me that.
if he has a tough time transitioning from right tackle to left guard, like even just that flip of doing everything opposite. Plus, when you go from
I think it's easier though, man. It's easier to go from tackle to guard than from guard to tackle.
So people think that it's different. You're more likely to find success, but it is more difficult in certain ways. So like if you're at tackle, you have time to kind of see people coming at you. Like your kick stepping back, there's like a little bit of a gap. When you're playing guard, that defensive tackle is right on top of you, and he's exploding out right. And you know what I mean? Like there's you don't have as much time to kind of set up, but you got to go. Where if you're not like used to the transition, and you have to be ready faster and you have to be stronger faster.
It's real trench warfare. The guard position. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not saying he can't do it, and I'm not saying he won't do it. I think he will. I just don't. These are. I think eventually by the end of the year, I think that's going to be his spot. But I don't know if he'll be ready week one, especially taking all the reps at right tackle.
Man, I'd like to see Jalen Mayfield take that. I mean, 6'6", 320, and I understand size doesn't necessarily. It's not necessarily a predictor for success, but
it helps.
It helps, especially at the interior offensive line. It helps. Size helps. It just does. You know, I mean, it helps. You know, in exterior offensive line, it helps at the tackle, but offensive line, defensive line, as we were saying earlier, it just helps. It helps to be bigger. It helps to have a bigger body. You have more to draw from, more momentum, and that's exactly what you need. Like you said, when you're exploding into each other in a split second. It's just you don't have time to adjust. You need to be able to shift your weight, and you can't. You need to be able to compensate with something else, right? If you're just being crushed by a Grady Jackson, it's like unless you're Grady Jackson's size, it's just forget about it.
And if you look at it, like whoever is going to be playing that left guard spot, they're going up against Fletcher Cox week one from Philadelphia, who's one of the best defensive tackles in the game. I think if you look, I don't have the schedule in front of me, but when you look at their schedule this year, I think they play like a bunch of good defensive tackles early on in the year. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Josh Andrews kind of holding on to that through preseason, and at some point Mayfield kind of taking over either right before the season or by the end of the season.
Yeah, I mean, you'll have a better indicator once training camp starts and you really see where Mayfield gets the majority of the snaps there. But that is, to your point, that if you're not getting snaps at left guard, which Mayfield isn't, there's little chance he'll be starting at left guard.
And it's difficult because McGarry's not been in, and Arthur Smith hasn't commented on why, and he doesn't have to until the season starts. But McGarry's also had a heart condition that's bothered him through his career. And if it was something serious, I'm pretty sure we would know about it. But who knows what it could be? Literally anything. Why he's
what
not
is
playing.
it? Let's look into that. Is it like a heart murmur, or is it just irregular heartbeat, something like that doesn't necessarily have, it doesn't necessarily have a negative impact on your physical abilities, but it can be problematic if you, you know what I mean? It definitely can be problematic if you sustain, a significant blow to the chest, which he's certainly going to. If you have an irregular heartbeat, it could just screw it up even more, and you could get taken out of a game.
Yeah, so he's had an irregular heartbeat, and he had surgery.
There you go.
He had surgery to kind of get it fixed.
Corrected it.
Yeah, but it's just been an issue in the past, so it's just something to kind of keep track of. And then Matt Gono, who they're hoping was going to be like the swing tackle, possibly left guard, who's played pretty well for Atlanta. When he's come in at tackle, he's played pretty well. But they were hoping he would take over, and he's hurt, and we don't know the extent of that injury. At first, reports came out and said he was done for the year, and then reports came out and said no, he's not done for the year, but they have not said whether or when he will be back at this point. So with that, we got to kind of look at we assume Caleb McGarry will be back because he attended the practices and was just kind of like on the sideline. So I'm going to kind of go with what I was saying already. Is Josh Andrews holds it down for a little while until Jalen Mayfield's ready to take over.
And Josh Andrews has been in the league a while now, mainly been a reserve, has started a few times.
He was actually one of the worst graded PFF guards last year, but he also played for the Jets, who had an atrocious offensive line.
They barely had an offense,
Yeah.
so it's hard, but he didn't play that well. But he's always been a big special teams contributor, so hopefully he's learned some stuff, and hopefully in a better system he'll do a little better.
Yeah, and so then when you kind of look at the backups, we know those 5 guys, right? We know we've got Jake Matthews, McGarry, more than 5 guys. We got Jake Matthews, McGarry, Mayfield, Dahlman, Chris Lindstrom, Hennessy are all going to make the team. I believe Josh Andrews is going to make the team, but starting, it's happened before where a starter loses their job in camp and ends up getting cut. But I think Josh Andrews does end up making that spot. Somebody else. So that's 7 guys, and Matt Gono, who they're paying $3 million to for they tagged him. He is going to make a spot if he's healthy. So now when we look at it, though, there has to be other backups, especially if Matt Gono is not going to be ready.
Yeah.
So which of these backup guys do you think kind of see us either keeping on let's say keeping on the main roster, and then we can talk about practice squad guys after.
Well, you're saying outside of the 7 guys, so because Dahlman's definitely on as a reserve, maybe pushing for starter, and then you have Mayfield looking like a reserve right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't think you can cut. I don't think you can cut Mayfield. I definitely can't cut him. He may not start, but he's not
the only person who we've mentioned that might not make the cut would be Josh Andrews.
But injuries and circumstance have pushed him into a spot where it's very unlikely because he's the reserve now. I mean,
yeah.
If we're talking about him as the starter, for him to go from starter to cut would be dramatic.
So with that, I really think Willie Beavers is probably the next guy that we will keep on the squad.
Oh dear, what do we know about Willie?
So Willie was cut from the Vikings this past season. He was drafted. The only one of the guys who we have left to talk about that was drafted. He's a pretty good athlete, and he's got good size.
He's a big boy, yeah.
Yep,
6'5", 330.
Yep, and coming out of college, he was just a good athlete, and he had like a lot of potential. He was big, strong, like I said, fast. But he just needed to play with like more consistent pad level, needed to kind of work on like his tendency to grab other defensive linemen. So that's who I would say is kind of taking over like as the backup tackle spot with Gano out. Now, another guy that I really like, and if Gano is healthy and let's say we wanted to bring on another guard, I really like Ryan Newsel out of Appalachian State. He was a priority free agent for us that we signed in this past offseason. What do you guys, have you guys looked at Ryan at all?
Ryan did a very good job at Appalachian State. It was very successful. It's funny, you look at who they brought in the offseason, undrafteds and drafteds outside of Jalen Mayfield, but Dahlman, along with some of the undrafteds, have a lot of similar problems in the sense of they need a little bit more strength. Like the measurables are a little scary as far as matching up with some of the guys that are going to be rushing against them at the guard spot, like from the D tackles. Like you talk about Fletcher Cox, like a lot of the guys that they brought in this offseason as rookies, you really don't want to watch any of them up against Fletcher Cox week 1.
Well, yeah, Fletcher Cox is a force of nature.
Right, and these guys that's going to take some time for a lot of them. And Newsel played at a smaller school, and he's going to be going up against a different level of talent. But he, like I said, with very good. I mean, he's third team All Sun Belt Conference as a senior.
So 44 consecutive starts.
Yeah,
he's got a lot of playing time.
Sure.
He's known as being like a tough, smart player. Just like everyone, a lot of the other people that they've brought.
How big
in.
is this guy? I mean, size wise.
6'3", 300 pounds.
Okay, so he's about average size for an offensive lineman.
Probably a little bit on the little bit smaller side,
Yeah.
but he's also like nasty. Like he plays nasty too.
Yeah.
So when you look at, I really like his. I think he's going to make the practice squad, and I think if we weren't looking at probably needing another offensive tackle, would have a good shot at, I think, at making the team. But just with Gano being hurt, we probably need a little bit more depth at offensive.
See,
tackle.
and that's this is where I say, like, I go back to like a Jalen Mayfield. I think a Jalen Mayfield would. I think he's probably your best bet to match up against someone like Fletcher Cox as far as what we have, right? Unless you want to bump McGarry in there or something, which would just be a disadvantage for us. It just wouldn't be. I don't know. Maybe it would. Like I said, it's an easier transition to go from tackle to guard, but then from guard to tackle. But that's why I'm definitely an advocate for Mayfield to get that. At least see some, get some looks at the left guard position. I just think he would.
I think he will. I think that'll be.
I hope he does.
That's where they've talked about. That's where they want him. But he's right now with the depth at offensive tackle, he's forced to play there.
He's a new guy.
So some other guys we haven't mentioned. We haven't talked about Willie Wright. Or you mentioned him a little bit. We haven't talked about William Sweet. We haven't talked about Joe Sculthorpe, Sam Jones, Brian Hargrove.
Well, what I was talking about earlier, Brian Hargrove and Joe Sculthorpe are the same. With the undrafteds being a little small, need to get bigger. Those guys, that's the main thing with them too. I think they're in a similar competition with Newsel for that practice squad spot, and Newsel leads right now. Is kind of where we're at.
When you look at it too, they all played left guard like throughout college. So Newsel also was originally going to play center. So he was going to play center his freshman year. He was the backup center and was looking to kind of take over that spot. And then there was an injury at left guard, and he just kind of never turned back. But he can play center too, which is that flexibility makes him, even more of a priority to kind of play, and the versatility that we've talked about. And then Sam Jones has been around the league for a little bit. He was with Denver for a little while, but he's not somebody who, I think highly of as taking one of those roster spots. So I would be surprised if he was still on the team. Same with all the other guys that we kind of mentioned. One person we didn't talk about too much that I really like as a practice squad guy is tackle Keon Smith. He just has all the potential in the world. Just like really long, really athletic, did play at a small time school. And he could potentially, he's not ready right now. Like if you were to say we need somebody to play, it's not him. But he has the potential to kind of turn into a starter or a high caliber starter in the league.
Yeah, he's just got a lot of development to go physically in.
Yeah, I could see him taking one of the roster spots or practice squad spots.
Yeah.
So we are kind of getting to the end here. So just kind of briefly go over it again. We don't have to go over the starters, but Ryan Newsel and Keon Smith are two guys that I would keep an eye on for potentially making the I would say they're pretty sure they're making the practice squad. Newsel possibly making the roster, and let's see what Newsel and Keon Smith kind of do for years to come. Are there any other guys that you guys kind of preferred or thought maybe could make the practice squad? Or
No. I think unless Jeff has something else to offer, I think what you said regarding the practice squad is probably accurate. As I previously said, I like the starting lineup that we've come up with and the probable battles that will take place at left guard and center. Other than that, I think we have a pretty strong offensive line. I think right tackle, left tackle, right guard are pretty solid. Left guard, center, we're going to see some power battles, but they're not bad power battles. We have solid depth.
I think part of it is like a lot of what we look at is like hoping that a lot of these guys take the next level. And I would say if they don't, we're probably in trouble. Like if McGarry, Lindstrom don't take that next step, if let's say Dahlman and Hennessy neither are ready to start at offense at center, and then we can't figure out the left tackle situation, we're in trouble. But from what we're like talking about and what I see is like I don't see any reason why those guys like we can't find a good 5 guys to play.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
we're hoping on a lot of progression. Anything from you, Jeff?
No, just that the guard. It's going to be really interesting outside of Lindstrom to see where a guard shakes out. Just left guard, we think we know who's going to start. Maybe wrong, but
so what? Sorry, I don't want to cut you off. But one thing I meant to say earlier is I would not be shocked because Lindstrom is like so ahead of the game and really he's great. If we moved him I could see him moving to left guard, and because of that switch of McGarry like bump going from the right to the left side, Mayfield goes to right guard, and you've got some beef on that right side of the line.
And like you said, that would be an interesting proposition, and it might be more likely if Gano was healthy, because having a backup tackle that can play if you need him to is huge, and so. In his first year, they're probably going to give Mayfield a lot of reps at tackle, just with Gano not being able to play it right now. I mean, it could all change.
All right, yeah, so let's see what happens. Just for a quick recap for today before we end, we did break down the offensive line, who we think the starters are going to be, the intense positional battles that we're going to have, as well as who we think is going to make the practice squad, and how Matt Gano kind of impacts the decisions going forward. Again, this is Thon Ray. You guys can follow us at Falcons_drip on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Please make sure you subscribe, follow, whatever you need to do to get the alert for our next episode. If you guys enjoyed today, please leave us a review. It always helps us grow. Until then, see you next time. Rise up.